Good evening. My name is Sheila Lui, and I am a caregiver for my mother, Edna, who is 94 and has been exhibiting symptoms of dementia for the past 3 or 4 years. When I was asked to speak tonight on my experience as a caregiver and my self-care within that context, I was hesitant, probably because I know there are so many other caregivers out there who carry a much heavier burden than I do. And I felt that my experience simply wouldn't be particularly significant or necessarily helpful to others. However, in going ahead with putting together this presentation, I recognize that it's given me an opportunity to think carefully about the caregiving role as I've experienced it. And consequently, I have benefited from exploring this topic of care for the caregiver, as I've been able to define more clearly what elements have been of greatest assistance and benefit to me. So I hope that some of these elements may resonate with you or help you also to identify what you need to do to provide support and care for yourself. I'd like to start with a biographical sketch of my mother, who's very important in my life. Edna was born in 1922 on a farm near Hanover, Ontario. As a young woman, she met and married Les, an Englishman who was training in Canada with the RAF during World War II. My mother then followed Dad to England, and we tease her that she was a war bride in reverse. She did things backwards. So they lived in England until a couple of years after the end of the war, and shortly after I was born, they decided to return to Canada and build a life here. My dad trained as a teacher and spent his entire teaching career with the London Board of Education. Edna, as a wife, mother of 2 daughters, homemaker, seamstress, quilt maker, pianist, church volunteer, youth group leader, etc., was busy, productive, creative, and involved in many activities outside the home. And I should mention that my parents loved to travel, and my sister and I benefited greatly in going along for the ride with them. When my dad retired in 1978, Edna and Les set out on a new adventure when they were assigned as missionaries for the United Church of Canada. They then spent 7 years in the tiny African kingdom of Lesotho, which you've probably never heard of, at a residential high school where my father was a teacher and administrator during the day and a maintenance handyman in his off hours. And my mother was a wife, homemaker, seamstress, quilt maker, sewing instructor for an elementary school class, and an instructor for workshops and women's groups in a variety of types of handiwork. And occasionally, on the side, she provided emergency transportation to hospital for the local inhabitants because in this rural area, people had no cars. So once again, she was busy, productive, creative, and involved with many people in the surrounding area. And one of the pictures up here is taken of my parents in the garden of their house in Lesotho. When my parents returned to Canada in 1985, they may have been officially retired, but they certainly continued to be busy and productive, spending time as wonderful grandparents to our children, doing volunteer work, carrying on with their many interests, including travel. In January of 2010, at age 87, my dad died, leaving Edna to cope on her own in the family home. At that time, Edna and I shared the executrix duties for my dad's estate, and I can affirm that she was bright, active, and totally able and comfortable dealing with the financial matters and so on. In April of that year, our son was married, and again, I've included a picture here of Mom with my sister and me taken at the wedding, where I think you can see that although she was aged 88 at that point, she was looking really good. Now we come to the part which is rather sad for me to think about, as I recap the development of my mother's dementia and our family's dawning awareness of this condition. Shortly after Mom's 90th birthday party, I began noticing that she was having some marked memory lapses or an occasional odd incident, such as forgetting how to use her credit card. This is when I started having conversations with my sister, Linda, sharing the odd things we were noticing. I lived here in London, about 3 blocks away from my mother, and saw her a few times a week, whereas my sister Linda lives in Strathroy, so she and her husband would usually come in to see Mum maybe once a week to visit and help out with odd jobs. I also started getting reports back from friends and neighbors who told me about changes that they were seeing in Mum's behavior and her interactions with them. Linda and I were becoming uneasy about Mum living on her own, and we started pushing her to look at assisted living or retirement homes. And she was extremely resistant to the idea of leaving her home of 50-plus years. It was only after she experienced a bad bout of bronchitis with a touch of pneumonia while living by herself that she reluctantly agreed to move into an assisted living retirement home. And Linda and I are extremely grateful for the kindness of the staff and the care and services that are provided at that home since she moved there in June of 2014 at age 92. I now recognize that, for me, the hard part of that period of time leading up to her moving into Riverside was feeling bewildered and unsure what was happening to Mum. There was no one clear, identifiable symptom that we could latch onto, and we weren't educated about dementia as a disease. So consequently, we were anxious, worried, unsure of how to proceed. In these past 3 years now, there's been some major stress points as the dementia has developed. During this period, we finally had a medical assessment done, and this concluded that Edna's symptoms were a result of vascular dementia. Major issues which were challenges for Edna and for my sister and I have included in 2014 choosing the retirement home, moving her out of her home, selling the house. In early 2015, the loss of her driver's license was a major challenge. In July 2015, she suffered a heart attack, which was quickly, efficiently dealt with, but it also resulted in the ongoing condition of congestive heart failure. So in the summer and fall of 2015, there were several hospitalizations, numerous ambulance runs to the ER as her medication needed to be adjusted to stabilize the congestive heart failure condition. When she spent time in hospital, she didn't understand or believe that she had a serious heart condition, and thus she was, to put it kindly, non-compliant with the protocols which the doctors and nurses were trying to put into place to help her. The dementia has made it particularly hard to stabilize and manage the congestive heart condition because Edna has no memory at all of the heart attack. Thus, she frequently refused her medications in the first few months because she didn't believe there was anything medically wrong with her. I still get phone calls from the staff at the residence when a nursing aide encounters a refusal from Edna, and I try to explain to her over the phone that she needs these medications. But again, she's very resistant at times to that idea. I'd now like to talk about the supports that I have had through this process and how valuable these have been. Again, it's a case of me looking back and realizing these are the elements that have helped as we've gone through this process. And the number one top support has been working as a team with my sister. I don't know how I would have gone through this without her with me. Next has been conversations and that listening ear that friends and family have given us, and particularly giving me a chance to vent and then talk over ways of addressing some of the issues that come up. And this includes conversations with, my sister, my husband, my children. There's a cousin that I'm close to who really is helpful in this area too. And there's all sorts of friends at my church, at my book club, my personal trainer at the gym who had a father with Parkinson's and understands what's going on. All these people give that little bit of support when it's needed. The third element is the Alzheimer's Society. Thank goodness I found them. It took some time for me to avail myself of the support and resources of the Alzheimer's Society. I guess I was in denial too. First, my husband gently suggested maybe we should look into this group. Then I heard a presentation actually from Susan here at our church group explaining some of the aspects of dementia and the Alzheimer's Society's role. And finally, another friend suggested attending one of the caregivers support groups, which she recommended based on her own experience. And I think she's here tonight, and I have to say thank you to Liz for that. I've attended the caregiver support groups. I've attended several of their First Link learning series, and each of these educational sessions has been very informative. It's given me knowledge of the tools, the information about how to respond to my mother's condition in a much more informed and helpful way. I understand better what's happening to her, why she's behaving in certain ways, and they give me some suggested techniques that will better support my mother and cause me less stress also. I would highly recommend these learning series for anyone with a loved one experiencing dementia. The Society also offers other speakers and educational events. There's been some recreational programs they offer, which I've gone to with my mother, which have been quite enjoyable. So connecting with the Alzheimer's Society has been a major building block in my process of becoming a better caregiver for my mother and being less stressed myself. Another element is simply I've done everything I can to educate myself about the dementia disease. So in addition to the Alzheimer's resources, I have searched out and read material specifically on dementia. Another element is maintaining outside activities. Now, I acknowledge that since I do not give custodial 24-hour-a-day care to mother, I'm much freer to carry on a fuller range of activities and interests. However, I do try to see my mother 4 or 5 times a week. I take her out for short outings. I visit her in the residence. We see to appointments and so on. I find that I must be more selective in choosing what outside activities I will participate in. In the past year, I've learned that taking a brief holiday, maybe 2 days or 3 days, is much more beneficial than trying to carve out a longer time period for a more extended time away. Music has always been a part of my life, and I continue to include music-related activities in my life. Church choir, a handbell choir, dance class lessons, so I finally get to spend some time with my husband. All these bring a sense of some joy and lightness into my life. Spending time with our much-loved 3-year-old granddaughter is a joy, not just for my husband and I, but also for my mother. So again, we try to arrange opportunities for Edna to visit with little Sarah also. I continue to visit the gym twice a week. They tell you that exercise is good for you, so I do it. I maintain participation in some other groups, such as a book club and a fiber art group. And of course, there's always reading and more reading. I am, after all, a retired librarian, so I enjoy that. So I'd like to give just a summary of my thoughts on self-care and what I've experienced over these last few years. First of all, the importance of acknowledging the dementia as a medical condition and asking for information and support from all possible sources. Then to accepting that I can't always solve or handle all the problems associated with my mother's dementia, and I really need to work with a team of other people, and putting those people in place, reaching out, contacting them is important. 3, accepting that I sometimes get frustrated or angry or sad or depressed about how this dementia journey is going, and I need to ask for and accept help at times. 4, talking about my mother's dementia and the consequences for me, physically, mentally, emotionally, is my best safety valve. Now, I know that people have different comfort levels about sharing what they're feeling or going through, but it is so helpful to find other people who will show empathy for your situation and be willing just to listen, not necessarily to offer advice or solution to your problems, but just to acknowledge that what you are experiencing. You just don't feel quite so alone. And last, choosing to be involved in activities that combine a special area of interest, in my case, such as music, but also combines that interest with a social aspect. So I'm with people who I enjoy being with, that I can chat with or talk to about what's going on in my life, and they are genuinely interested and supportive. So, and in the end, of course, I do try to reciprocate and give some time and attention to friends who are experiencing challenges in their life. So I'd like to thank you for your attention to my presentation, and I hope that wherever you are on this journey of being a caregiver, you will find the help and support you need to comfort and care for yourself too. Thank you.